got quite a lot of content in these slides today, so do let me know what's going to be most useful for you. I thought we could start just with a little bit of an icebreaker, just to find out a little bit more about you all, because obviously I can't see everybody. Tell me just in the chat, so where are you just now? Where are you joining the session from? I'll start. If you've got access to the chat there, if you just let me know, where is it? Where are you just now? Just to, we'll maybe see who's furthest away from Stirling. Oh, a few coming in there. A couple of people are in Stirling. Okay, I think Weymouth furthest away so far. Anybody got any advance on Weymouth? More Stirling, more Stirling. Dunbar. Somebody else is near Falkirk as well. You're not far away from me then. Oban, yeah, that's a fair wee distance away. Brilliant. And yeah, is there anything exciting happening outside your window just now? So you've just heard me say, as I say, we've got birds nesting out there just now. So there was a bit of chaos out there. Anybody got a nicer view than I do at the moment?
It's not raining. That's the best, exciting thing here.
It's dry at the moment. Yes, definitely. I don't know what's happened to May. Usually it's quite a nice month in Scotland, but it's not been as nice this year altogether. No. Somebody can see the sea. Oh, I wish I could see the sea out my window just now. A magnolia tree. That's a nice view. Oh, it's lovely to get a sense of where everybody is just now. So do keep that coming in. As I say, it's really interesting to see where everybody's joining the session from. And importantly, is there something that I can answer for you today around CVs and covering letters? So as I say, I've got a lot of content, but I can absolutely adjust that as we go along to fit with what would be most useful to you attending this event. Is there any particular questions or things you would like to know about how to write your CV, what information to include, what information to leave off? Any kind of challenges that you find ahead of interviews, for example?
Are they kind of templates? Of course, it's probably we should know what to write, but the easy way is kind of have some template to have us.
Yes.
Something to know what to start with and be careful about.
Absolutely, yes. I can point you in the direction of some templates. So as part of the session today, we'll look at some different formats of CV. And yes, I can point you in the direction to find some useful templates online. So yes, you can get a sense of how to structure it, what information to include, what to focus on. And it also can very much depend on the type of job that you're applying for. So if you're applying in the private sector, it's going to look a little bit different than if you're applying for an academic position. So getting a sense of what would be the best format for you. Okay, is there any other particular questions at the moment? Star format, yes, I do have a slide for that, so we'll get to that later in the session. Yeah, I'm talking about talk a little bit more about what star is and how to use that. Okay. I am happy to be interrupted, I should say, so do let me know as we go along if there are any questions that come up. As people have been doing, please do feel free to use your microphone. Sometimes that can be a little bit faster than typing in the chat, but obviously, yeah, you're very welcome to use the chat. I've got that running on the screen there, so I will keep referring back to it. Okay, so a bit about the career service. So this is our general mission statement: to provide you with high quality careers information, education and guidance, and to empower you to make informed career decisions and develop lifelong career management skills. And as I was saying, we don't cut you off as a Stirling graduate, so you are welcome to continue to use our services even once you've completed your studies at Stirling. So the objectives that I had for this session this morning is to contrast some of the common CV formats that are used in the UK. So it's very much a UK focused session. So if you're applying for jobs outside of the UK, then obviously that's something that you need to be aware that different countries do have different expectations. So an example that comes to mind is a lot of European countries will expect you to have a photograph on your CV, but that's not something that you would have on a CV for the UK market. So again, just little differences like that that's useful to be aware of. If you're applying overseas, then there is further information and guidance on the Careers and Employability Service Canvas page to talk you through different formats and different expectations. Okay. To help you to analyse which style of CV is going to work best for you. So as I mentioned, it's going to look different depending on where you're applying and what you're applying for. To support you in writing an effective CV. And then the second half of the session to identify some common interview questions and to help you to demonstrate good interview technique. And as somebody was saying there about preparing for the interview, absolutely things that you can do in advance to prepare for your next interview. I've included this little cartoon image of an employer buried under a pile of CVs because for a lot of vacancies, this image is not that far from the truth. A lot of employers do find themselves overwhelmed by the volume of CVs that they receive. So the important thing is that you can stand out in this process. It's, you know, employers are looking for a reason to discard CVs when they are receiving, you know, high volumes of applications. It's an easy thing to say that you need to stand out. So what I would like to do is to give you some kind of practical advice and tips on how you can do that. Okay, a question for you. What do you think is the average amount of time that professional recruiters spend reading a CV? Is it A, 2 minutes, B, 60 seconds, C, 30 seconds, or D, 6 seconds? So we've got a vote for C already. Any advance on that? Anybody want to take a guess? Somebody else, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, yep. Any other guesses there? Somebody saying C, 30 seconds. Yep. A few people are going for C. Or somebody going for A, the 2 minutes. Anything else there? So far, nobody has selected D, just 6 seconds. But an online job matching service called The Ladders did a bit of research on this using eye tracking software with 30 professional recruiters. And they found that on average, they were only spending 6 seconds reading a CV. That's potentially a sort of initial look or glance over a CV to decide, you know, do I want to read this in more detail or do I not think that this document has what I'm looking for? So if you are a professional recruiter, if you are dealing with high volumes of CVs, then yeah, depending on the role, they may be spending as little as 6 seconds, giving it a quick glance, a quick once over, and they'll have 2 piles and they'll have the ones that they want to read in more detail and the ones that they can immediately reject for whatever reason. So you want to get into the pile where they're going to come back to it and read it in more detail, and that's where they're more likely to spend sort of, you know, a few minutes on it rather than seconds. So it's quite scary to think that, you know, you could spend all day working on your CV and somebody could, you know, reject it on the basis of a quick once over. So that's why things like, you know, just taking a quick look at your CV, thinking what first impression does it give? Is it clearly laid out? Does it have clear headings? Are you avoiding large blocks of text? Can you, you know, attract somebody's attention and make them think, yeah, I like this candidate, I want to read on, I want to find out more about them. So thinking about that, tell me, what are some of the, I suppose, golden rules or things that you should always do when you're writing your CV. So you can let me know in the comments, or again, happy for you to use your microphone. What do you think are the most important things? Yes, definitely. So bold headings, really clearly defined sections, makes life easier for the employer. They can skip to different sections of the CV. Yeah, spelling your name correctly. Yeah, you would be surprised that yeah, that can go wrong for people sometimes. Keeping it brief yet specific, I think that's right. You know, again, you know, recruiters don't have time to read lots and lots of text. So trying to perhaps use like bullet points, for example. Personally, I really like bullet points. I think it makes everything look neat and easy to follow. And like you say, it's keeping it brief, to the point. Absolutely. Anything else? Yeah, no artistic photos, yes. That's an interesting point, actually. Yeah, so as I say, for the UK job market, you wouldn't be expected to have your photograph on there. It gets a bit confusing because the exception to the rule is if you are creating a LinkedIn profile in the UK, then employers would expect to see a photograph on your LinkedIn profile, because otherwise it can look like it's a fake profile. But for your CV, yeah, no photographs. And talking about kind of being artistic in your CV, again, there's a little bit of risk involved in that. So I've seen a few CVs where people have gone in and made it quite fancy looking and used nice like graphics and images. I think it's something you need to be careful of, because you don't want the style to overtake the substance, if that makes sense. So the most important thing is the content of the CV, not necessarily, you know, trying to make it fancy and eye-catching with lots of images and things. Consistency with formatting, yes, I'm actually really glad somebody has said that, because yeah, I do see a lot of CVs where people have perhaps copied and pasted from other documents, and yeah, maybe the font size is slightly different, or they've used a slightly different font, and yeah, it can look a little bit messy. So definitely being consistent with the formatting, absolutely. So yeah, excellent, some really good points there. So I've got a little bit of a do's and don'ts generally on this slide. And again, as I say, very much focused on the UK job market. So make sure you're highlighting those transferable skills. Really, the most important golden rule is that you are targeting and tailoring your CV to the job description. This means that you will have to make some changes to your CV every time you apply for a different job, because you've got to show the employer that you're taking their job description into consideration and you've matched yourself to their requirements. We talked about formatting there, so making sure it's well formatted, clear headings, sections, potentially using bullet points. You can include a link to your LinkedIn profile. If you have a LinkedIn profile, it's quite useful to include that on your CV, because that gives the employer an opportunity to go and look up more information about you. The other thing you can do with LinkedIn, if you've not done so already, is to create what they call a vanity URL. It just means that instead of a big long series of letters and numbers in terms of the LinkedIn link, it condenses it down a little bit, so you can get it down to sort of linkedin.com / first name, surname. So that's something to look at on LinkedIn. Using action words, so we'll talk about that. I've got another slide with some examples of action words, and highlighting your impact, so what difference you've made in your previous employment. Sounds pretty obvious, but be really careful about spelling and grammar errors. Again, a lot of students will roll their eyes when I talk about this, because it seems a really obvious one. But if you have spent all day working on your CV, it can be quite easy to miss like typos and little spelling and grammar errors. And when an employer is looking for a reason to reject a CV, that's a really easy reason to say, well, this person hasn't put enough care and attention into their CV, so we're not going to look at that any further. Try not to exceed 2 pages. So again, in some countries, a 1-page CV is common. In the UK, it's 2 pages. But try not to go over that unless it's an academic CV, which I'll talk about as well. Mention not using the same CV for more than one job. Try not to include long paragraphs of text because, yeah, likely the person who is hiring probably doesn't have time to read it all. Don't give too much space to outdated experience. Try not to leave unexplained gaps. If you do have gaps in your education and employment history, then come and have a chat with us at the Career Service and we can talk about how to present that to the employer. You know, maybe if you've had to take time out for illness or, you know, family issues or things like that, we can help you to explain that on your CV. Yeah, don't forget to include basics like your name, your contact information. Don't just list tasks without relating it to a skill. What I mean by that is I see quite a lot of student CVs where, for example, maybe you've had a part-time job in a shop or a bar or a restaurant, and the CV basically lists your duties in that role. So, you know, serving tables, taking drinks orders, you know, that kind of thing, which is fine, but you can make so much more of that. So if you're talking about restaurant work, for example, link it into all the skills that go along with restaurant work. So you're working under pressure in a busy environment. You are working accurately and showing attention to detail when you're taking orders and delivering food to tables. You are working as part of a team with other waiting staff, bar staff, kitchen staff. You've shown that you can, say, work under pressure. So you want to highlight all of those transferable skills. Don't include your date of birth on a UK CV. So nationality, date of birth, any kind of protected characteristics, and as I mentioned before, a photograph don't need to be included on a UK CV. And hopefully, again, you don't need me to tell you this, but be careful not to lie on a CV, because if you are caught out at a later date, it will not go down well with the employer. I just noticed over in the chat a question about sharing the slides. Very happy to send the slides over to Alexandra to see how best to share them out with you. And as mentioned, the session's been recorded as well. So if you want to go back and skip to different sections, you'll be able to do that. So what are the different styles of CV? So the most common one you'll see is what we call chronological or reverse chronological, because usually you put your most recent information first and you work backwards. That style of CV is also sometimes called a traditional or an experience-based CV. The next one that we see most commonly is a skills-based format, and then academic and infographic as well. So the ones I'm going to focus on today are the top two, so the traditional experience-based and the skills-based. I'll touch a little bit on academic CVs. Infographic is more for possibly like creative type roles, so roles where an infographic CV, as the name suggests, it does have like images and graphics on it, and it's quite a creative style of CV, and it's a slightly risky format to use outside of the creative industries. So we'll focus on the other options today. So, do you want to use a skills-based CV or an experience-based CV? There are kind of pros and cons to each, and there's no right or wrong answer here. CVs can be very subjective, and what works well for one person might not work as well for another person, but I'll kind of run you through some of the key points for each of them. A skills-based CV is one that I recommend a lot to students and new graduates who don't have a lot of work experience for the sector that they want to go into. Because a skills-based CV, it's more about highlighting your potential and your transferable skills rather than focusing on your previous work experience or progression. So if you've had a lot of experience in the industry that you want to work in, you might want to use a more traditional format that showcases all of the jobs that you've had and the progression that you've made through those roles. If not, then a skills-based CV is a really good way to show your potential and how you are now in a good position to move into this relatively new area of work. The work experience section on a skills-based CV is very short because the focus is on your skills, not your previous work experience. So the work experience section usually just has the name of the employer, what the role was, and when you worked there, with not a lot of additional information. It's really useful, as I say, at the start of your career or if you're changing career. Make sure you include evidence. So in a skills-based CV, you can't just tell the employer, I'm an excellent communicator or I'm a fantastic team player. You need to back it up with some evidence and examples and say, you know, I'm a great communicator because, and give them some evidence and examples. The evidence can come from any aspect of your work experience. So, of your experience. So it can be work experience, or it can be volunteering, it can be involvement with clubs and societies, it can be part-time jobs. So you can bring in evidence from lots of different areas. The slight drawback of a skills-based CV is that it does take longer to write because you're trying to think about, you know, what skills do I want to highlight and what evidence do I want to use for each skill. The traditional CV format is most commonly used. As I say, it's probably the format that you're most familiar with. The emphasis, as I mentioned, is on your work experience and it shows your progression in your work history. I've got a little bit of an example. I don't know how well you can see that, but there's a link there. If you go on to the Careers and Employability Service Canvas module, that's the module code 3162. If you sign up to the module, there's not like any work involved in that. Basically, we use the Canvas module as an information source. So it's where we store, I think we have around 300 pages of careers content on our Canvas module. So if you're not already enrolled on the Canvas module, it's a good one to connect with. And as somebody mentioned at the start, you'll be able to see this and a few other CV templates and layouts on there. So some concrete examples of how the CV could look. Because a skills-based CV, a CV is maybe not as familiar to you, this gives you a sense of how it could look. So again, person's name at the top, their LinkedIn profile, their phone number, their address, they have a short personal profile, and then it's a skills and achievements section that they have. They've listed communication skills, and analytical skills, and organisation and event management on there as well. So then what they've done is under communication skills, they've got some bullet points which demonstrate how they've used those skills. And actually none of those examples are from paid work. So the first one is they talk about working with customers in a part-time volunteering role with a charity shop, then building relationships with organisations when they were looking for sponsorship for the women's hockey club. And the last one is from their academic experience where they gave a presentation to a class of 40 students. So it gives you an idea of types of examples you could use and how you could lay it out. And thank you to Alexandra posting the link in the chat there to the module on Canvas, so you can go and have a look at some of these CV examples. Okay, so for academic CVs, so anybody who is thinking of pursuing a career in academia, these are going to, again, look different from the previous examples. So an academic CV is a lot longer than a standard CV. So the 2-page rule doesn't apply here. The focus is very much on publications, research, funding awards, those kinds of sort of experience from your academic study so far. You can include a list of publications as an appendix, and obviously as you're progressing through your academic career, you'll be able to add and develop that further. You also want to highlight any teaching and administrative experience that you have, because a lot of academic roles are, they're not going to be purely research focused. There's going to be, a teaching element and an administrative element to that. So being able to show those skills is really useful as well. So if you're going through a PhD at the moment, it's really useful, even just to keep a little diary of, any teaching experience you've been able to get, anything that you're doing sort of outside of your main research project, so that when you are applying for jobs at the end, you can look back through the diary that you've kept and have a good record of some of the projects that you've been involved in, any of the modules that you've supported, and that kind of thing. You want to include any professional qualifications, memberships of professional bodies, conferences that you've attended, these kinds of things. And again, thank you for copying those links over into the chat, because I appreciate you can't really click on them on the slide. So if you don't already use it, the VTI website is a really useful one for anyone thinking about pursuing an academic career. Lots of really useful content on there, including, again, CV templates. So do have a look on the VTI website for an example of an academic style of CV. And same, also the Prospects website has some more examples. It's got examples of skills-based, the traditional format, and also academic CVs on there as well. So lots of useful resources. If you are presenting your research, then there's a few things to think about. Obviously, the first question is kind of, who is my audience? Is this somebody that will understand the technical terminology, the acronyms that you're using? Or is it somebody who has maybe not any background in your subject area? So think about, what was the aims of your research, what you've done to achieve those aims, what techniques you used, what skills you've developed from that. As master's students and PhD candidates, there are a lot of transferable skills that come from your studies. And very often students will focus on the academic side, but they forget about the things like the research skills, team working, communication, time management, project management. Doing a dissertation or a PhD thesis is a huge exercise in project management. So you want to be able to highlight those skills, and obviously making clear the results of your research. Again, presenting research, so any practical experience that you've had. So if you've done any field work or placements, then you want to include information about that. What responsibilities that you've had. So I mentioned if you've had any teaching experience, if you've been on any committees, anything sort of over and above your studies. Publications, conferences I mentioned, anywhere that you've presented, any awards that you've won, obviously you want to make that really clear, and any additional professional level qualifications as well. So a little bit of a summary in terms of getting the basics on your CV right. 2 pages of A4, unless it's an academic CV, then we know that you've got more space to show publications and research interests. Making sure it's a nice clear layout, that it's very much matched to the job and the company. This is where a skills-based CV can be really valuable, because in a skills-based CV, if the company has asked for specific skills or experience in the job description, and then you use those skills as your headings in the CV, it can make you quite a difficult candidate to ignore. Because if the employer has said, we want someone with great communication skills, team working skills, organising skills, research skills, and then you put those as headings in your CV and you give your examples that show where you've demonstrated the skills, then you are really making it clear to the employer how you match the requirements of the job. As I said, you do need to have that evidence in there, and that evidence can come from any aspect of your experience. So it can be academic study, it can be previous work experience, it can be volunteering roles, it can be something that you've done as part of a club or society. Good spelling and grammar is important, your contact details. The next point I have on there is your interests, if they are interesting. I'll explain what I mean by that. So in the career service, we see a lot of CVs, and very often in the hobbies and interests section, students will write, in my spare time, I enjoy reading and socializing with my friends. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. It's just that it doesn't help you to stand out in any way at all. And if that's what you're going to write as your interests, then I think you're better just leaving the interests section off of your CV and use that space to talk about something else that's more directly relevant to the job. One of the arguments for including an interests section on your CV is to show a little bit of your personality. A CV, it's quite a dry document. It's very much, a summary of your work experience, your skills, your education. Having an interest section on there can show a little bit more about you as a person. And it may actually show that, you might have interests or hobbies that are actually directly relevant to the job that you want to go into. So it can help to demonstrate your commitment to that career. Other things you could do is use the interest section to further demonstrate your skills. So for example, if you were to say, in my spare time, I enjoy running, and I've recently started training for a half marathon and raising money for charity. I've developed my own training program and I've exceeded my fundraising target. Again, that shows that starts to get a little bit more interesting. The employer would start to take more notice of something like that. So very much, as I say, a personal choice there. Think about that in your own situation. Do you think, it's worth putting interest on your CV, or could you use that space in another way? A covering letter is really important to send with your CV. Unless the employer has said they don't want a covering letter, I would always recommend that you include one, because a covering letter is an opportunity to really sell yourself a little bit more to the employer. Again, there are example covering letters on the careers module on Canvas, so you can have a look at how to lay it out. A rough guide would be to start with, why you're writing to the company, what it is you're applying for, then why you are interested in working for this company or this organisation, then what makes you a good candidate for them, and then something positive to end with, saying, thank you for taking the time to read my application. I look forward to hearing from you, something like that. Okay, I realise I am talking quite fast and moving through these slides quite quickly, so I'm just going to pause for a moment in case there are any questions at this stage, and also allow me to have a wee drink of water.
Hi, Lauren.
Hello.
Hello. I've got a quick question.
Yes.
So if you've got a skills-based CV, should your cover letter then also be skills-based, or what sort of topics should you cover on your cover letter?
So I think the covering letter is pretty much the same kind of format, whether you've got a skills-based CV or a more traditional CV layout. The covering letter, it gives you a chance to really talk about why you're interested in this employer, and that it shows that you've done a little bit of homework on the employer, you know about who they are, what they do, you're clear about why you want to work for them. And then what you are doing in the next paragraph is drawing their attention to maybe some specific areas of your CV. You could say, as you can see from my CV, I have experience of, or I have skills in. So if there's something that you wanted to make sure they definitely noticed, you could highlight that in the covering letter. Or if the employer's got a really long wish list, which a lot of employers do in their job description, and you've not had enough space to put it all on your CV, then you can use the covering letter to maybe cover off some points that you didn't get a chance to talk about in your CV, or that you just wanted to give more information or more detail about. Yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you, Lauren.
Excellent. Anything else at the moment? Will I skip on? Okay, as I say, please don't be afraid to interrupt me. If you want to even stick a hand up or just open your microphone, then yeah, just jump in, it's absolutely fine. Okay, so in terms of the layout and the sections for your CV, so what you should include, obviously we've said you need to have your contact information on there. I would usually recommend that you use your name as the heading on the CV. Sometimes people will write curriculum vitae along the top, but the employer should be clear on what the document is. So you don't need to write curriculum vitae. If you put your name as the heading, then that is the first thing that the employer sees about you. Just a quick question coming through in the chat there. How long should the covering letter be? So about a page of A4. Again, not really any longer than that, because the employer's not going to take the time to read anything more than a page of A4. So hopefully, yeah, you'll be able to get all the content into that one page. And where possible, you know, try and lay it out like a professional letter. It's not something that we do a lot now that everything goes by email. We don't tend to sit down and write formal professional letters. But it's nice to structure your covering letter as a professional letter, and there are lots of templates online for how to structure the letter, where to put the address, where to put the date, or as I say, have a look at the examples on our Canvas module. Personal profile, I'm going to talk about a little bit more because I have a little bit of a bugbear with personal profiles, so I'll talk a little bit more about that. Then obviously you need to include education, work experience, your skills, potentially your interests if you think that would be useful to include and it would add value. You can also put your references on your CV if you have space. If you don't have enough space, then it's okay to say just a line that says references are available on request. So that's absolutely fine. Okay, the personal profile. You don't need to include this on a CV. Again, it's a personal choice if you want to have it on there or not. One of the reasons to include a short profile is to introduce yourself to the employer right at the beginning of the CV and to hopefully encourage them to read on and to find out more about you. So it's a short, snappy paragraph about you. It focuses on your career aim or your objective or your skills and achievements, or a little bit of both. It's a personal advert. So what you're studying, you know, who you are, what you're doing just now, what it is you're aiming for, and what skills you can bring. Okay, this is the issue that I have with personal profiles. Again, at the Career Service, we review and give feedback on hundreds and hundreds of CVs. And this is very common to what a lot of personal profiles say. So hardworking, honest, motivated individual who works well as part of a team, always work hard and arrive on time, a good communicator, and can work on my own initiative. When you read that, there's not necessarily anything wrong with it. It's not a terrible personal profile. But really, it's not adding any value whatsoever. Employers read these exact words and phrases every day, and they start to lose meaning with the employers. We would hope, as an employer, that you're going to be hardworking, that you're going to be honest, that you'll be able to arrive on time. these are things that should be, you know, it should be a given, really. So how can you help yourself stand out? How can you get the employer's attention and not be too generic in your personal profile? So here are some examples. So what you can see is here, I've tried to be a little bit more specific about who the person is, what they've done, and what they can bring to the role, or what it is that they're looking for. So it's, you know, 2-3 lines, just talking about, you know, what you're doing just now. So the first one, you know, I'm an environmental geography student at the University of Stirling with a great passion for environment and conservation, excellent communication skills earned from 3 years experience in customer service and volunteering roles, seeking a part-time position to put into practice my knowledge and experience of conservation. So I won't read out all of those examples, but hopefully if I just go back to the previous example, you can see the difference. So the first example, it's just too generic. It doesn't really tell the employer anything about you, and it doesn't really encourage them to read the rest of your CV. In these examples, I would say that, you know, you're immediately telling them that you have a relevant qualification, that you've got relevant skills, and that you are actively seeking to work in this sector or this type of job. You can be even more specific in your CV and use the job title that you're applying for. So, you know, you could put in there the name of the job title and the name of the company. Obviously, you do just need to be careful with that you make sure you definitely change that each time you apply for a new role, because we have heard a few horror stories where students have sent an application with the wrong name to an employer, and obviously it doesn't go across very well when the employer receives it. Okay. Just noticed a question in the chat. So is it necessary to pay attention to using the same font, theme and size for both the CV and the covering letter? Yes, I would. I think it would look more professional, more consistent to have, the same font size, or roughly the same font size across the two documents, because they are effectively traveling together to the employer. So I think that, that would look kind of more professional to have that, connection between the two documents. What I would say as well is, if you're sending your CV and covering letter to an employer, save it in a PDF format. Just make sure that you don't lose any of the formatting when it's opened by the employer. So a PDF format obviously means that it's not going to get jumbled up when it arrives at the other end. How small is acceptable as a font size? Good question, because we do have guidance on that. We say not any smaller than 10 point, because I think once you start getting smaller than 10 point, it starts getting quite difficult to read. And sometimes people do try and just reduce the font size to try and cram more and more information into the CV. But yeah, I'd say don't go any smaller than 10 point. Okay. Impact is really important. So I mentioned before about people talking about their previous work experience in the terms of what their kind of tasks were, so what they had to do on a day-to-day basis. So I had to clean tables, I had to serve customers, I had to work with other team members. But what employers are interested to know is, what was the impact? What was the difference that you made to that business or that organization? They don't just want to know about your daily tasks. They want to know, what difference did you make? So if you met or exceeded sales targets, for example, that would be really good evidence of impact. If you got an Employee of the Month award or a Customer Service award, that demonstrates impact. It's quite good if you can use figures or put a number on some of your examples in your CV. So instead of saying something like, I increased sales in this job, you could say, I increased sales and we were exceeded my target by 20%. If you put a number on it, it gives more context to the employer so they can get a real sense of your achievements in that role. So what was your impact? What did you achieve in that previous job? So that's something to think about when you are talking about your work experience. What difference did you make when you were there? I mentioned action words all the way back at the beginning of the slide deck. So action words are to try and help you stand out again amongst a high volume of applications. How can you sound like you are the right candidate for this job? It's about being positive on your CV. I know a lot of people find it quite difficult to talk about themselves on paper, and they're worried about sounding arrogant, sounding big-headed, but it's really important that you have confidence and that you are confidently talking about your skills and experience. Your CV is a sales document. You are selling yourself to the employer. When you talk about your experience, instead of saying things like, I did, I helped with, you could say, I actively contributed to, I developed, I delivered. So thinking about using more of this kind of positive language, and it sounds more professional and it gives a greater sense of the impact that you made. So words like did, helped with, was involved in, they can sound a little bit weak. So you want to be more positive. So not just I developed, I successfully developed a new procedure or something like that for your previous employer. I confidently presented to my class of 40 students, not just I delivered a presentation. If you're feeling a bit uncomfortable with that and you're struggling to talk about yourself on paper, do think about your competition, because if other people are writing like this about themselves, then you need to do the same. You need to present yourself with confidence to the employer. Similarly, with a covering letter, a lot of students will write, I feel I have good team working skills. And again, nothing really wrong with that, but why not be more confident and say, I have good team working skills, and give them the evidence or the example that proves that you have that skill. So yeah, that's definitely one of the things I would say, is to present yourself with confidence. Okay, next part is the interview. What would people prefer to do? So it's 5:02 just now. Would you like to just take 5 minutes before we move on to talk about interviews? Maybe just to get a chance to stand up, stretch your legs, grab a drink, something like that. People be happy to do that?
Yeah, I would be for it.
Yep. Yeah, okay, so 5:02 just now. If we come back at 11, then we'll move on to the interview part of the session today. So thank you for everybody for following along with me so far. And yeah, I'll just pop my camera off just now. And yeah, I'll meet you all back here at 11 o'clock then. Okay?
Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks. Okay, hi everybody. Hope you've had a chance to maybe grab a drink or stretch your legs there. Yeah, so I've just noticed question coming in there just to start the second part of the session this morning. So how would you advise dealing with gaps in your employment history or justifying a career change? So many of mature students use the Masters as a pivotal career point from which to redirect their path. Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that I come across quite a lot with people who are changing career direction is that they are almost apologetic for doing something different before. So like I spoke recently to somebody who was moving away from nursing, and she was really struggling to talk about, why she wanted to do that. Because, she felt that she almost had to apologize for the fact that she didn't choose the new career path earlier on. I think what you want to show the employer is that you have used your previous experience and it's given you valuable experience. It's not been a mistake to do something different first. That was the right decision for you at that point in time. But now, you've had a chance to develop more experience, to learn more skills, and to realize that actually the career path that you want to focus on lies in a slightly different direction. So explaining to the employer, these are my personal reasons for making this career change. So I think that's where you want to frame it in a positive way. So again, talking from personal experience, I worked for a financial services company for 3 years after I graduated, which was a bit of a crazy thing for me to do because I can't say that numeracy was ever a strong skill for me or even a skill that I particularly enjoyed using. I think I just did it because I didn't know what else to do. But I wouldn't say that was wasted time. I think there was a lot that I learned from that, a lot of things that were consolidated from that experience and that motivated me to pursue something different. So I think you can frame it in that sense. If you have gaps in your employment history, I think it depends on the reason for the gap. So again, if you want to speak to us individually at the Career Service, we can certainly work with you to think about, how best to present that. If you've had time out to raise a family, for example, that is something that you can put on the CV, but you can also include all of the skills that go along with taking time out to raise a family. Oh, sorry, somebody's saying I'm cutting out a lot at the moment. Is that other people's experience as well?
No, it's fine for me.
Other people okay? All right, okay. Sorry, Paul, it's maybe a connection issue at your end there. Right, thank you. Thanks for other people just confirming it's okay for them. Okay, we'll continue then. Yeah, so in terms of, as I was mentioning, if it's time out to raise a family, then you want to highlight the skills that have come from that. So again, thinking about all the organising and planning that goes along with that. You develop a lot of patience if you're staying at home with small children. So these kinds of skills you can really draw out from that. If it was maybe time out due to ill health or disability, then again, you're thinking about how you have developed your resilience, your problem solving, your resourcefulness to get around maybe some of the challenges that you've faced, and how you've met and overcome those challenges can actually be a positive thing in terms of, your CV and for employers. So hopefully that answers the question to an extent there. Okay. What about interviews? I've included a little bit of a cliche statement on here. So to fail to prepare is to prepare to fail. And as I say, yes, I appreciate it's a bit of a cliche, but in terms of interviews, it is very much the truth. So preparation is one of the most important things that you can do ahead of an interview. And I just really like this little meme from The Office, the US version of The Office. Sometimes I'll start a sentence and I don't even know where it's going. I just hope that I find it along the way. And again, from my own experience, I have definitely been in interviews where you start answering the question and then you suddenly realise that you can't actually remember what the question was and what you're trying to say. So a few hints and tips in this second half of the session to help you prepare for interviews and help you avoid that situation where you start talking but you're not really sure where you're going with the answer. Okay, so over to you again for this one. Tell me, what steps can you take to prepare for an interview? So if you've had an interview in the past, what did you do to prepare for it? Or if you've never had an interview, same question, you know, what would you do? What can you do in advance of an interview to be well prepared? Great, so a response already. Research the organisation. Yes, definitely. Rehearse, yes. RR, research and rehearse. I like that. Yep, definitely. Was that Sabrina? Did you want to come in there?
I was just wondering, probably we need to know exactly what was in the job description and what we are applying for to have, you know, a clue what to talk and what we can be asked from the employer.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. So when you apply for a job, do make sure that you keep a copy of that job description, because by the time that you're invited to attend an interview, the job description will no longer be on the website. They will have taken it down. So make sure you keep a copy of the job description in case you're invited for an interview. So then exactly that, you can refer back to it. You can remember what the employer was asking for, because a lot of their questions are very likely to be based around the job description and the criteria for the position. What to do when you're asked to do a presentation demonstrating your skills. Yeah, so sometimes you are asked to do a practical exercise as part of the interview process. It's usually very much just to see how well you communicate and present in front of an audience. So again, doing your homework, doing your research on the employer before you start putting the presentation together, and make sure you have a clear, well-focused presentation, and that you invite them to ask questions at the end of the presentation. So if you've done lots of presentations as part of your studies, then that's some good experience there. But there's also just making sure that you're following a good structure for your presentation is one of the key points. Yes, definitely prepare questions to ask the interviewers. I think an interviewer is not likely to be impressed if you come to the end of the interview and they ask, you know, do you have any questions for me? And all they get from the candidate is, yeah, no, I think you've answered them all. It makes it sound like you're not all that interested in the job, the position, the company. So you want to make sure that you ask them some questions. So what sort of questions should you ask? I do have some examples on one of the slides, so we can take a look through them to give you a sense of what you should ask the interviewers. I would say, you know, in an interview, do remember that you are testing out this job, as well as, you know, the interviewer is trying to find out if they want to hire you. But you are also trying to get a sense of this company. Would you be happy working there? You know, would you enjoy this job? So it is your opportunity to find out a little bit more about how the role is structured, how the company is managed, to understand, you know, would I be happy working here? So there may be things that you need to ask that are specific to your circumstances. You know, perhaps do they have a flexible working arrangement, for example? But we'll run through some example questions just a bit later in the presentation. Okay. So absolutely, research the employer, research the job, keep a copy of that job description. Prepare a bit of an elevator pitch. So that is really in the sense of answering the question, tell me about yourself. A lot of students tell me that they struggle to answer that question, and it's not really designed to be a difficult question. It's just something that a lot of interviewers ask at the start as a way to get you talking. So you don't need to give them your full life history. It's just a little bit about who you are, what you're doing at the moment, and kind of why you're there, why you're applying for the job. Be ready for a bit of small talk. Again, this is maybe more common in the UK than in other countries, but we do like a bit of small talk at the start of an interview. Can depend on the interviewer's personality, but again, it's really designed so that you are not walking straight into the first interview question. If you're being interviewed in person, usually they have to come and collect you from a reception area. So there's just a little bit of chat maybe while you're walking to the interview room, usually about the weather, or it could be about, you know, did you find us okay, or how did you get here today, like that kind of thing. Be aware that you can be assessed from the minute you enter an organisation. So it's very common for reception staff to be asked their impressions of interview candidates. So you want to be sort of friendly and engage with any members of staff that you meet from when you go into the company. Obviously, I'm talking a lot about in-person interviews, but it may be at the moment that your interview is more likely to be on a platform like Teams. So I will talk a little bit about that as well. Anticipate those obvious questions. If you've got the job description, you know, and the job description says we want a good team worker, a good communicator, a good organizer, then they're probably going to ask you about those things. Make sure you've got examples prepared. Obviously, if you've got a bit of a journey to get there, make sure you're well planned in advance. You've got a copy of the company's phone number in case you need to get in touch if you're running late for any reason. We'll talk about questions to ask, and definitely doing your rehearsal or a bit of practice in advance. In terms of researching the employer, some of the things to think about are, you know, what does this organisation do? Where does it operate? What market are they in? Who are their key clients? Do they have a business mission statement? What's their general ethos as an organisation? Who are its main competitors? What challenges does it face at the moment? Are they on social media? Because in the first instance, you would want to make sure you are familiar with their website, but social media can be a really good way to get more up-to-date information about projects that they're working on and things that they've been involved in. So make sure you follow them on Twitter, on LinkedIn, perhaps even Facebook as well, to get a sense of their activities as a business. And have they had any recent growth? So again, a very common interview question is, why do you want to work for us? What do you know about our business? What current challenges face our business at the moment? So you want to be able to talk knowledgeably about these. So practice. Practice is, yeah, really important. And it's all about talking out loud, not just writing down what you want to say, but actually rehearsing your answers out loud. Helps you to test whether you can remember all the key points that you want to make. It's definitely going to increase your confidence if you've done a good amount of practice in advance. See if you can find a willing friend or family member to ask you some questions, or talk to yourself. If you are on your own at the moment, then that's absolutely fine. Just practice talking to yourself. You can record yourself on your phone. It can be really uncomfortable to watch it back, but it can also be quite useful to let you see how you're getting on, how you're answering the questions. You can use Graduates First. As a Stirling student, you have access to a resource called Graduates First that we have purchased a license to, and you can practice video interviews on there. So you can set up some questions, and it gives you some automated feedback on your interview performance. In saying all of this, I don't want you to come across as too rehearsed. So it's quite easy to fall into that trap. If the employer asks a question that you have prepared for, that you've expected to be asked, it can be easy to start kind of sounding a bit too rehearsed and a bit too static in your answers. So you want the answer to sound natural, even if you're expecting the question. You try and make it sound as natural as possible when you're answering the questions. And again, having a look on our Canvas module for more content on interviews, and the link to Graduates First is on there as well. A really common interview question is, why do you want this job? So a lot of employers will ask that, why are you here? Why have you applied to work for us? Why do you want to work for this company? Why do you want the job? What they are trying to glean from you here is to show that you can do the job, so you've got the right skills for it, that you genuinely want the job, and that you are motivated to take on this role, and that you fit with the organisation and their values as an organisation. So a couple of things to think about when we're trying to answer that question about why you want this job. So let them know, if you really want this job, if it seems like the perfect job for you on paper, tell them that. Tell them, I really want to do this job. It's a great match for me. It really fits with my skills and my experience. It would be a fantastic opportunity to work for your organisation because you meet my values in these areas. So tell them about how much you want the position. A few other interview questions that you might come across. These are what we would call competency-based questions. And a competency-based question is asking you to give a specific example. It usually starts with describe a situation, or tell me about a time when, or give me an example of. If you hear that at the start of the question, it means the employer wants you to give a specific example. So you'll see some examples on there. So a situation, you were able to persuade someone, you've used presentation skills, you were involved in a research project, when you've used data analysis. So for these questions, you want to have to give them a specific example. So thinking about, and the examples, again, similarly to your CV, they can come from work experience, they can come from your academic studies, they can come from involvement in clubs and societies, anything that shows how you have developed that skill. It's quite difficult if they ask a question that is a skill that you use on a regular basis. So if they say, tell me about a time when you've used good communication skills, you are probably using your communication skills on a daily basis. But they are looking for a specific time when you particularly had to use communication skills. So try and narrow it down for them. With these types of questions, remember to say I and not we. A lot of people fall into the trap of talking about we did this and then we did that. But the employer's not recruiting your whole team. They only want to know about you, your responsibilities, your particular role, what your involvement was. So remember to say, I did this. My responsibility was for. So talk about I and my instead of we. We mentioned right back at the start of the session about the STAR technique. Yeah, tell me, does anybody know what that stands for? Have you come across the STAR technique before?
I didn't.
No, I'm not sure about it.
Nope.
Nope. Anybody else? Anybody heard of it before? Yes, yep. The first S is for situation, and task, action, and result. That's it. You've got it exactly. So situation, task, action, result. Sometimes the R can also stand for reflection. So perhaps if the situation you're describing didn't exactly go to plan, then you can reflect and talk about why that was and what you've learned from it. But very much, yes, when you are giving your examples, tell the employer what the situation was, give them the context. So who, what, why, where, what that particular task was that you were faced with, what the action that you took was to, or what you did to address that task, and then what was the result. So as a very, very broad example, you could say something like, if you're asked about team working skills, you could say, well, during my master's programme of study at the University of Stirling, we were required to give a class presentation. So that's your situation and your task. The action I took was to arrange for my team to meet outside of class time. I got everybody's contact details and found a suitable time for us to meet. I helped to divide up the tasks amongst the team. We each took a different topic. My topic was to address this particular aspect. The end result was we delivered our presentation to the class, and we received a good grade for it. So that's, as I say, a very vague, very general example, but just to give you a sense of how you could structure your answer to that question. So the situation, the task, the action, and what the end result was. So trying to be quite specific with your examples. Okay. Difficult questions. So yeah, more kind of awkward or difficult questions that can come up in interviews. Tell me about a mistake that you've made at work. What didn't you like about your last job? What are your weaknesses? So those first three are quite negative sounding questions. If you are faced with those questions in an interview situation, what you need to think about is, again, how to turn it round into a positive. So tell me about a mistake that you've made at work. Everybody makes mistakes, so you can't say, I've never made a mistake. But try and choose something that obviously isn't a major mistake, that didn't have a big impact on the company, just something small that actually, and then reflect on it and talk about, well, actually now I realised that had I done this earlier, or had I reported it sooner, or had I spoken to this person, that actually, I could have avoided that issue or that mistake. So something small, but talk about, what you've learned from it and how you will make sure that the same mistake isn't going to happen again. So any kind of negative questions like that, yeah, trying to turn it round into a positive. The weaknesses one, I don't know if employers ask that as much anymore, because it is quite a cliched interview question and it is very negative sounding, but some employers may still ask about weaknesses. Again, you can't say that you have no weaknesses, because everybody does. So again, try to focus on something that isn't a key element for the job. You could say something like, in the past, I've been really nervous and anxious about public speaking and delivering presentations, but I've taken a presentation skills class and I've been trying to make sure that I speak up more in my class sessions as part of my studies. And I'm actually starting to feel, a lot more confident in speaking publicly now. So identifying the weakness and telling the employer, I've identified it, I recognise this is an area that I'm not as strong in, but this is what I'm doing about it. This is how I'm going to get past it. Why should we hire you? Again, that's kind of a little bit of an elevator pitch. So what it is about you, what are your unique selling points, and what makes you a good candidate? And again, this is really your opportunity to sell yourself, to tell the employer that you really want to work there, that you're really keen, you're enthusiastic about the opportunity, it's really important to you, and that you can meet the criteria that they're looking for. What salary are you expecting is quite a difficult one. If they've not been clear about the salary in the job description, it's not very fair of them to ask you about it and to put you on the spot in an interview situation, but sometimes it can happen. I would try to avoid getting into any salary discussions in the interview. You could say something like, you know, I'd be very happy, if I'm offered the position, I would be very happy to negotiate on salary. Or you could say, you know, I noticed that you were advertising the job between this salary band and this salary band, and you know, I'd be happy to negotiate based on that if I'm offered the position. So yeah, and trying to sort of deflect that question as something that you would follow up on if they do actually want to give you the job, because you don't want to undersell yourself at this stage, but you also don't want to ask for too much and put them off. So yeah, I think that would be a kind of way to try and get into those discussions if you were successful. How do you handle stress or conflict at work? So again, one of those questions that's a little bit negative sounding, but just trying to show that, yeah, when I'm faced with stressful situations, you know, whether it's, you know, I like to go for walks or take exercise or to read books, just something that shows how you personally manage that. Okay. Strengths-based interviews. If we're thinking about academia or the aquaculture, life sciences industry more broadly, you're probably not going to come up against a strengths-based interview. They tend to be used more widely in big corporate organisations. But I thought it was worth bringing it up just in case, you know, it is something that you are interested in, or that you apply for and they offer you a strengths-based interview. So it's a bit of a different approach. The idea is that a lot of employers have realised that candidates can rehearse for competency-based interviews. So a strengths-based interview is not something that you can really do a lot of practice for in advance. It focuses on what you enjoy doing rather than what you've done previously. So it's not so much asking you for examples. And what they're looking at is your motivation, your enthusiasm, whether you're genuinely interested in the topic that's being discussed. So they're focusing on your tone of voice, your body language. You know, are you leaning forward? Are you interested in what's being said? Or is it something that doesn't really connect with you? And the spontaneity of your response. So whether you have to take a long time to think about it or if something immediately comes to mind. The questions are really carefully worded, so they want to know about, you know, what you do well, what you feel good about, what you do often. You usually get a few warm-up questions, so they can be questions like, you know, describe your ideal day. What is your favourite part about your current job? So these kind of warm-up questions, and then they'll have forced response questions. So that could be something like, do you prefer to complete your work in advance, or do you prefer to work right up until the deadline? So you have to give one answer or the other. It's really difficult to second guess exactly what the employer is looking for. So in a strengths-based interview, you can really only go with what is the best answer for you. And sometimes there'll be really specific scenario questions. So what would you do if you were in this situation? And then, you know, for example, if they give you a scenario where, you know, you have to give a presentation, so people who like presentations will probably be like, okay, yeah, so this is what I would do. This is how I would prepare for it. People who don't like giving presentations would probably be a bit more kind of anxious looking and not as sure of themselves. And that's where they're really using like body language and your tone of voice to really understand, is this something that you are genuinely like, or would you struggle with it? And then your capability and engagement for each question is scored. As I say, you're probably not as likely to come up against strengths-based. Competency-based questions are still the most common, but I thought it was worth including that information. Okay, looking at these two interview candidates, tell me, if you are the interviewer, who would you prefer to interview, the candidate on the left or the candidate on the right? And I'm saying that with the caveat that I appreciate shaking hands probably isn't appropriate at the moment. So this is a little bit of a dated photograph in that respect. But generally speaking, who do you think you would rather interview? Okay, a couple of people saying the person on the right. Why is that? What is it? I mean, these two people are dressed the same. They both look very professional. She looks like a robot. Okay. The confident posture. Yeah. Anything else about the two candidates? A smile. Yes.
The right one looks more friendly and approachable.
She does, doesn't she? And that is all down to body language. So exactly that. Somebody noticed eye contact. Yes, eye contact, the smile, looking more confident. The candidate on the left, she's looking a little bit more closed off in terms of her body language. She's looking down. She doesn't look quite as confident. So I think what I'm trying to illustrate here is the difference that body language can make when you first meet somebody and those first impressions. So we've not heard either of them speak. Neither of them have said anything. As I say, they're both well presented. They both look professional. It all comes down to body language. And that's one of the main pieces of feedback that I will give students if we do a mock interview. It's usually to tell them to remember to smile. Because an interview, it is a stressful situation. You can feel a bit anxious and nervous. But yeah, try to remember to smile because it really helps you to engage more with the interviewer. It looks like you're happy to be there, that you're excited about the opportunity to meet this company and to interview for them. Yeah, even if handshakes are maybe not appropriate for the time being, given that, yeah, putting that to one side, I would say, yeah, for all those reasons, the person on the right gives a better first impression. And there's a bit of psychology behind this as well. So you would think that in terms of an interview, it would be all about your competency and gaining the respect of the interviewer. But actually, when it comes to like first impressions and kind of looking back from an evolutionary perspective, warmth is more important when we are meeting new people and mentally assessing them. So you want to show your warmth, show through your body language, your smile, and connect with the interviewer before you go on to the next point, which is to demonstrate your competence and your ability for the role. So a bit about virtual and online interviews, because they are here to stay. I was at a conference, well, not physically at a conference, I was at an online conference a few weeks ago delivered by the Institute of Student Employers. And there was a lot of graduate employers there who were all saying that online interviews are effectively here to stay. They all had a bit of a panic about it when they first had to move them online, but a lot of them have found that they work well. They don't need to pay travel expenses for a candidate, that pretty much they can interview just as well through video as they can meeting a candidate face-to-face, or at least in the initial stages of the recruitment process. Maybe when you get further into a graduate recruitment process, for example, they would ask to meet you in person then. It depends on what type of job you're applying for. So yes, you may well be asked to attend your interview on an online platform such as Teams or Zoom or whatever it is that the employer is using. So of course, the first thing is to try and do a little test of the technology beforehand if you can, especially if it's a platform that you've not used before. So see if you can find somebody to do a bit of a trial run with you. You still need to dress professionally, so even if it's an online interview, it's still important to show that you've made the effort for the interviewer. You think about paying attention to things like your lighting, the camera angle, and what's going on in your background. You don't want any kind of distractions in the background if possible. Lighting, again, you don't want to be sort of completely in shadow, so think about, you know, if you need a lamp or something just to give some better light. The camera angle, again, this is something that, and again, it might just be personal to me, but when you see people being interviewed on TV and their camera is underneath them, it kind of feels like they're looking down on you a little bit. I find that quite distracting. So again, I think it just looks better and more professional to see if you can try and raise the camera up. So even if you need to put, you know, prop up your phone on a shelf or something, or if it's your laptop, you know, put a few books under it or something just to give you a slightly better camera angle so you're not looking down on the interviewer. Obviously, we were talking about body language, making eye contact. That's more difficult to do via a video call, but if you look at the camera, it does give the impression of eye contact, even if you can't physically make eye contact with the interviewer. So that's something that you can try, is just to look at the camera when you can, to give that impression of a connection and making eye contact. One of the advantages of a video interview is that you can use notes, but don't get distracted by them. So again, I've seen, I think it was Keir Starmer actually was interviewed on the news again a little while ago, but he was very clearly reading from notes on his desk, and it was quite distracting for the person watching. So yeah, you can have a few notes, but don't be sort of looking down and being distracted by them. It may just be a couple of key points that you want to post around your screen to help you remember some of the points that you really want to get across to the interviewer. Okay, so coming back to this questions to ask. So we've kind of touched on this a little bit. So you get to the end of the interview, the interviewer says, "That's all from me. Do you have anything you would like to ask?" So a few example questions for you here. What size of team will I be working with? How will I know I'm doing a good job? Will I get regular appraisals with a line manager? You'd probably earn extra points if you can maybe pick up something that you've noticed from your research on the company. So saying, I've noticed that you know, this is happening at the moment. How is the company responding to this situation? Is it new government legislation? Is it, you know, another kind of related issue to the company? So think about, you know, I noticed on your website you were talking about this. How are you responding to that? Or can you tell me more about that? What opportunities are there for continued professional development? So will you get opportunities to do more training, to develop in the role? I noticed the company has recently invested in, you know, whether it's new premises, new equipment. What's been the impact of that? Can you tell me more about the culture here? And what do you enjoy most about working here? I think sometimes that's quite a nice question to ask, to get a sense of the working environment and what it's like. So yeah, asking the interviewer, you know, how long have you worked here and what do you enjoy most about it? And as I mentioned before, that's just some very general questions. There may be things that are more specific to the role that are important for you to ask. And just as I say that, I know somebody had posted in the chat and I think I skipped past it. Let me see. About jobs that offer flexible hours, full-time, part-time, what's the best answer? So maybe if they're asking about your availability, for example, again, it might come down to your own personal circumstances. So if you have other responsibilities outside of work, so family, caring responsibilities, that sort of thing, then maybe, you know, if it's part-time hours that are best for you, then that might be what you want to ask for. Or it may be that you can start working with the company on a full-time basis and potentially look to move to more flexible hours later on. So again, it's something that a conversation that you could have with the employer. If it's really important to you that there's flexibility or that you have the option to work part-time, it's something that you can ask them about. If it's a bit of a deal breaker, so if they have advertised the job as full-time, usually they do have a contact to phone ahead to ask if you've got any inquiries about the job advert or about applying for the role. So you could phone and ask, would there be any opportunity for this role to be a job share or flexible working? And then you can get that information before you apply, because sometimes it just means it saves you some time applying for a job that isn't going to be right for you if they're not going to be able to offer you, if it's a job share option or a part-time opportunity. Yeah, I think I'd kind of skip past the context of that question, so hopefully that answers it, but I can come back to questions at the end. Maybe we can pause the recording at the end of the session if anybody then wants to ask questions. Okay, so I wonder if there's anybody who kind of falls into this category. I've certainly spoken to a couple of students this week who have told me that they're really struggling with nerves and anxiety when going for interviews. So I think one student, it was their first kind of professional level interview. And another, I think it was the same situation for them. They'd had interviews for part-time jobs before, but nothing that was at sort of graduate level. In terms of managing those nerves and anxiety, a few nerves are a good thing. They can make sure that you're kind of a little bit more kind of focused, and it shows that this opportunity is important to you. But you don't want them to take over and negatively affect your performance. The first thing to think about is that the interviewers were impressed by your application and they want you to do well. Only a very poor interviewer is trying to make things difficult for you. A good interviewer wants to get the best from you as a candidate. They don't want to trip you up. They don't want to make you feel nervous. They are just trying to get the best from you to find out if you would be a good fit for their company or their business. If you've done your preparation in advance, then that can really help you to feel more confident about the interview process. So, and tell yourself that. Remind yourself, I'm well prepared. I've done my homework in advance. I've researched the company. I've thought about my examples for the questions. Take time to think about your answers. So going back to that slide about starting to say something and then not sure where you're going with it. It's perfectly fine in an interview situation to say, that's a really great question. I just need a minute to think about how best to answer that for you. And one of the students I spoke to this week, English wasn't her first language. So that's almost, an additional layer that you've got to manage on top of someone who's, I say people whose first language is English will struggle sometimes with interviews. So doing an interview in a second language can be even more challenging. So it's perfectly fine to tell the employer, I just need a moment to think about how best to answer that for you. If you're really stuck and you can't think of a thing to say and you've gone blank, then ask them if you can come back to that question later in the interview. Because once you get talking, you do start to pick up and feel more confident as the interview progresses. And once you're into the flow of talking, then you can come back to the question later on, and the answer should come more easily to you. If you don't know the answer, then it's perfectly fine to say, I'll be completely honest and tell you that I don't know the answer to that question, but here's what I would do to find out. So that's better than trying to give a kind of rough reply that you don't really know what you want to say. It depends on what works for you, but I think, positive mantras, visualization, visualize the interview going well ahead of time. remind yourself that you can do this, that you're well prepared, and trying to keep those thoughts as positive as possible. If nerves and anxiety is something that you do really struggle with, then again, look at the confidence resources on, it says the website on that slide, but actually I think all the confidence resources have been moved onto the Canvas module now. So do go on there and work through that. There's even a little kind of activity that you can work through in terms of developing your confidence, and it's one of the most used it was one of the most used areas on the website, so we know it's something that you're definitely not alone if you're experiencing nerves and anxiety about interviews. And just remembering to breathe because yeah, it can be quite a stressful situation. If you've not seen it already, then there's a really popular TED Talk by Amy Cuddy about your body language shapes who you are. And this is all about how changing your body position can help to lower your stress levels and make you to become and feel more confident. It's only about 20 minutes long. It's definitely worth a watch. There's some really interesting research that she's done based on this. On that screenshot that I've got there, it says 39 million views. I think it's now more like 60 million views. So it is a really popular talk. There's a shortened version of it on YouTube as well, but it is worth a watch if you feel like you could use a bit of a confidence boost. Something that not a lot of people do after an interview is to say thank you. Not a lot of people think to do this, and it's not necessarily going to guarantee that you get the job, but in a competitive process, it may just remind the employer about who you are and what you can bring to the role again. So if you think, you know, the interviewer might have spent all day interviewing people, it can be quite exhausting and they've spent a lot of time on it. So just a little thank you email to the interviewer saying, you know, I really appreciated the chance to interview with you today, maybe referencing a point from your discussion and re-emphasizing your interest in the position. Not a long email, not something, you know, if you forget what you wanted to say in the interview, don't go into kind of a long rambling email about, oh, I should have told you this and I forgot to mention that. It's not what it's about. It's just thanking the interviewer for their time and just re-emphasizing that you were, you know, it was great to learn more about the company and you're still very much interested in the position, and, you know, please let me know if you need any more information. So you don't have to do that. So you may not be able to easily get the interviewer's email address, but if you can, then say it's just a nice, polite thing to do to follow up. A few more specific resources that might be useful just around kind of aquaculture overlapping into marine biology. So again, on our Canvas module, we've got a section around what you can do with aquaculture and marine biology. Hopefully you'll be familiar with SAKE's New Wave of Talent videos on YouTube, but there's a lot of really interesting content on there. And just a few other links that you can follow up with as well. So I'm thinking about like industry relevant publications, so Fish Farmer magazine, industry like professional bodies is really good to engage with. And then other jobs boards. GradCracker is STEM jobs, specifically for STEM jobs. And then also there's the more specific ones, so Scottish Sea Farms, World Fishing. I've had a colleague just was talking to me recently about PhD students that are looking to work outside of academia, and healthcare communications is becoming quite a growing area for people who have a PhD in a life sciences subject. So that might be, again, another area or option or something to look at when you're considering, you know, what to do next when you finish your qualifications. Okay. So a little bit of a recap then. So we've looked at and contrasted some of the common CV formats that are used in the UK. Hopefully helped you to analyse around which style of CV would work best for you and your individual circumstances, helping you to write a more effective CV. We've identified some common interview questions, competency-based questions, some of the more difficult ones that you might come up against, and hopefully supported you to demonstrate that good interview technique. So doing your preparation in advance, practicing, rehearsing ahead of time, making small talk with the employer, being aware of your body language, all those points that have been addressed in the presentation. In terms of following up, as I mentioned, the career service is available to you throughout your time as a student or through your PhD research and beyond. So once you're a graduate, you can still get in touch with us. And that's a few ways to follow up. So through our social media and also the link to our Canvas module on there as well. If you would like to make an individual appointment with myself or one of the other members of the team, I will quickly type in the chat. It's our Target Connect system that we use for that. So it's stirling.targetconnect.net. So the Target Connect system is where you can book a careers appointment, and it's basically, go on, look at the available appointment slots and click to book, and then we'll send you a link to meet you over Teams. It's where we list all of our events. So we're doing a lot of Life Beyond Stirling events are coming up for those who are graduating over the summer, but they are open to postgraduates as well. So lots of events happening on there. As I say, it's where you can book appointments. And the third reason to use Target Connect is for the job vacancies. So it is a vacancies board as well. And you can set up job alerts and preferences on there. Okay, so that is everything from me in terms of slides. Let me stop presenting just now. So I don't know, Alexandra, is it worth pausing the recording just there in case we want to maybe follow up with a few questions or anything?
Yes, I'll do that now.